Back we go. Thank you, Jenny. So we go to Lars. Welcome, everybody, to a briefing show, Unsolved Mysteries. And for those that have heard it all before, I apologise. So funny. Poor old Lars. He's got himself into a little bit of strife. He was in Bulgaria with friends and indicated probably a couple of days before flying home, sorry about that, guys, that things weren't going right because he got into a fight on a beach with footy fans. And these footy fans in Europe really do fight a lot, so there's nothing particularly unusual about that. They were fighting over whose team was the best or whatever. And then, of course, next after a night out, this is not the same day, they left the bar. They were the last customers to leave, according to the bartenders, and went to McDonald's for something to eat. And once they got to McDonald's, he refused to go inside. He stayed outside, and when they went out to find him, he was gone. There's no real clear indication of why he stayed outside in the first place. The next morning, but he could have been pretty drunk. We don't know that part of it. The next morning, he told them that he'd been beaten or got into a fight with some fans outside, although this doesn't explain why he disappeared. I sort of think maybe if that was the truth, if he saw these guys or if he was freaking out a little bit, he might have actually just run straight back to his hotel room because he was there in the morning. They say his friends said that he told them that fans had sent Russian thugs to beat him up, which they did find hard to believe in. It brings up these questions about what they're relating, how drunk were they, what was actually said, what do they remember. There's a lot of sort of curiosities right there. But the long and the short of that was after that second fight, not necessarily the first one, or by the next day, he had a very sore ear. And so he went off to the hospital, off to the ER, and he was told he had ear damage, maybe a ruptured eardrum or definitely inflamed. And so he couldn't get on the flight the next day to fly with his friends home. This meant he put his flight off, and because he's flying from Bulgaria back to Germany, I'm assuming that's what he was doing, he did get a script for some antibiotics. But everybody agrees, the doctors agree that were all interviewed, that there wouldn't be side effects that would make him, a little bit doolally or anything else. And for anybody that's interested or gets, intuitive information, feel free to call on in and tell us what you think, because it's that area that we're looking at. The idea here is that we're not shunning psychics and intuitive information, or type any information that you think you've got in there. We've got, as I said earlier, I'll repeat, here's that's not it. If you scroll back up the chat a little way, you'll see that there's a link to the video. This is the last footage he was seen at the airport. And there seems to be nothing really wrong. As you move through, you can actually see him. Here's a picture of him walking into the airport. Airport's well covered. So once he returned to his hotel, he called his mum, and this is after seeing the doctor, and told her he was scared that 4 men were following him. And after hanging up, he texted her asking what cefuroxime 500 was. Interesting, Jenny feels he's dead. Which indicates he may not have understood the doctor's explanation of the fact that it was an antibiotic. He also asked his mum to put a stop on his credit card, as he didn't trust the hotel with the information. He was concerned that they might be ripping him off. Really kind of unusual behaviour starting to exhibit here, and clearly his mum got worried. Then he gets to the airport, everything looks normal, and if you watch that video, you can see he looks totally normal. And he looks in control, he looks calm, and although he starts out running at high speed, when you see that whole interlude, we've got here another shot of him at the airport, and in this shot he's got his backpack on, and I think this is kind of important, because when he runs out of the airport he hasn't got the backpack, which you would assume he would keep and wear because he's going to hop on a plane, so that would be his onboard luggage. That would be the thing with his passport, his wallet, everything would be in that little backpack that he's got there. Anyway, he didn't trust the hotel, so 2 hours later, again, a cab drove him to the airport, where he arrived in the early morning. He arrived at the airport around 6 a.m. His mother booked him a bus and an airplane ticket because he had told her that he couldn't fly or drive. Now, that was before meeting the doctor, and of course, there are those who make a bit of an issue about that, but if his eardrum was ruptured or very sore, he would have known already that he couldn't fly, and he wouldn't be able to drive. He'd have been in a bit of pain. When he gets to the airport, everything, while it looks normal, something changes. Now, interestingly, with all of the film that they've got the entry, they've got the exit, they've got him running around in the car park, and if you look at when he's in the far distance of the car park, he changes direction. But it's also noticeable that while he was in the airport, where he went out into the car park is where the bus was. So I'm not sure what happened then, but he went out without his bag, which meant he checked it in, or it's sitting inside somewhere. I didn't see anywhere where they actually said whether he checked in his bag, but I would assume he had. The police had his bag, and witnesses all report him as looking and behaving normally. The police say there's no indication of any drugs, paraphernalia, or nothing unusual is found in his bags. And to me, the most interesting part of that would be the backpack, I suppose. Have you got any ideas on all this, Tammy? Where's she gone?
Yeah, I'm here. I just muted. Well, yeah, it's kind of funny. It's just like, I don't know, I'm picking up like he, with the medicine, and that was, I think that played a big role in it, and maybe his, because his behavior seemed normal, in the airport and everything, and then all of a sudden, like you said, he jetted out of the airport and then, changed direction, like for no reason. So, that to me, is a little funny, and just heading towards the bus. Did he head towards the bus? Did, something happen at that last moment, where somebody grabbed him, or, is he feeling ill? He got on the bus and he was feeling ill, and then something happened, but then people on the bus would have seen, so it kind of feels like the medicine played a little bit of a role in it for me.
I would agree, except for its antibiotics. Antibiotics are not really known for, they're not necessarily psychotropic. They don't have a brain effect. If a person's going to feel sick from antibiotics, it's usually going to be they feel crook in the tummy, that kind of thing, not a brain thing. If it was another type of drug, I might go there, but there's no actual evidence that he even took the medications. So, yeah, his poor mum. Look, that's his mum in that picture there. I just explained why I put that picture there. They have an ongoing help site looking for him, or any information from him, or anybody that thinks they know anything. She would love them to get in touch. They've actually reasserted the case a few times on German TV, but unfortunately you just have no idea really where he was. But yeah, the changing of direction, you can see it's almost as if he's going to the bus, and then suddenly he switches direction completely, doesn't he? Which is really bizarre in itself.
Right, exactly. That's what one of the primary things also that I feel is bizarre is because he was going to that direction, knowing that he couldn't get on the plane. I guess he was like, maybe, like you said, he was feeling that people were following him, and maybe he was trying to, in his mind, divert them. So he went to the airport, and then the last minute switched. Because knowing that he couldn't get on the airplane because of his ears, and then tried to do the bus route, and then maybe switched again. So, like kind of playing duck goose with the would-be people that were supposed to be following him.
Yeah, well, that's the bit because he said people were following him. The police and, in general, the doctor and his friends seemed to think that he was having some kind of nervous breakdown or some kind of weird breakdown. But then to me, those things come after the fact. I can't explain this behavior, therefore this is a possible explanation, rather than this is what happened to him. And I think for me, the most interesting bit, if you look at that video footage again, is he's literally split out of that airport. But as soon as you see the shot from the doors, he's just completely slow and he's just loping then. You know what I mean? He moves into this instantly slower gait once he gets out the door. Yet as he's inside the airport, he's full tit running, isn't he? You know, it's like a big deal. That's like a serious run, that first part. As if he's either going to miss something or be late for something, yet he's in the airport, or he's forgotten something. You know, so I don't know if he caught, because he caught a taxi to the airport as well. So there's that possibility. Was he trying to catch the taxi? What happened there? We've got Jenny saying, I think people killed him, and that would explain the running. And Becca's saying that is what I got. He was going that way and then saw someone he was trying to avoid, and that is why he changed direction. That's actually a really good possibility right there, isn't it, really, that he saw somebody and changed direction. It's a pity they didn't have, there's nothing from that moment on, so he's gone off camera, and that's the last he was ever seen in 2014. So it's a couple of years down the track. And so if anybody's listening to this, Lars Mittank, LARSMITTANK, there's a help site that his mum keeps running. The police also have a help site. It's difficult because, of course, it's in German. So, but if you have information, you can go there and you can make a contact. And most Germans do actually speak more than passable English, just so we're clear. And Tammy's got a really great story. How are you this morning, by the way, my darling?
I'm doing good. I had a little bit of computer things, but I'm great now.
Fantastic. So Tammy's dug up the story. His name's Ricky McCormick, yeah? Ricky McCormick.
Yes.
Yeah, there we go. It's all yours.
Okay. This is Mr. Ricky McCormick, and it's an unsolved mystery. He was found when he was 41 years old in a field. His body was dumped in a field near St. Louis, Missouri in 1999. He was last seen June 24th in 1999. They found him, I think it was 72 hours later or 5 days later, and his body was severely decomposed. It was found by the sheriff's department of St. Louis, Missouri. They have two conflicting dates, the 29th or the 30th of 1999. The police say that he was murdered and dumped in the field because that field was known for that, either taking people there to murder them or to dump the dead body. He was a illiterate person by nature. He didn't do very well in school, and they said by the time he left school, he wasn't really able to read or write that much, other than he knew how to write his name and he could scribble a little here and there. He suffered from heart and lung problems, and he was he had another conflicting thing. He had between 2 or 4 children, and 2 of them were he fathered 2 of them by a little girl who was like 14 years old, who he called Pretty Baby, and he was sentenced to jail for that because she was 14 for 3 years, but he only served 11 months. And so the funny part of it is when they found his body, he had 2 encrypted notes or messages in his pocket, and the FBI, the Cryptanalysis and Racketeering Reports Unit, and both the American Cryptogram Association haven't been able to decipher his messages, and they asked for help 12 years later, calling the public to help decipher the messages that they haven't been able to decipher. And many mathematicians and Scientologists and stuff within the FBI have tried. And his parents didn't even know about this letters, and they found out on the TV in the news when the FBI was asking the public for help to figure out what these messages were, because they still to this day haven't been able to decipher them. He's on the FBI site. He ranks number 3 in the most top unsolved cases. And there's another girl that coincidentally they call her Ilanka Dunnan, and she does like a encryption analysis. I guess she's some sort of street person, but she feels that McCormick didn't write these, that he was coerced into and these messages, and so they're still till today looking for people to help because the case is still unsolved. And it's strange that the FBI had these messages for 12 years before they came forward to finally try and ask for help to decipher them. So it was they don't know who killed him, and they couldn't even barely they don't know what he died from, just that they found the body like really decomposed. So it's a big I'm like, the messages are really, it's weird because he couldn't read and write, yet there's these messages. So the question is, did he write them? Did someone else make him write them? Did someone else write them and put them there? And why? Was he killed? There were rumors that he used to go down to Florida and bring up big bags of drugs, that he was some sort of independent, drug dealer or something like that. So, there's just, too many questions on what was found there close to this other girl's house that does the coding. She does her own, analysis and stuff. So there's a lot of questions of why he was found where he was, and the messages, it's still to this day unsolved. No one can figure it out. And they do have on the FBI website, still, if anybody wants to, take a try at it and try and decipher it, they have a place where you can go do that.
And I've popped that link into the chat, so that's the first link I've put in there, is the link to the FBI website where they have got this code that you can have a go if you want to have a go at cracking it. You can go to that site, download it or print it, whatever you want to do, and then you can have a bit of a fun time with it. Now, the second one I've put in is a lay person, an amateur cryptanalyst, and she is quite interested. Tells you how a code could be made, but she also talks about Ricky in particular. On the FBI website, which I thought was kind of interesting, there were two things for me, Tammy. I think I said to you yesterday. The first thing was that the 12 years. The 12 years.
Yeah.
There was for everybody to understand that when he was found in 1999, because nobody really knew why he died, or how he died, their first assumption was, yes, okay, it's a bit suspicious, but the poor dude's got lung and heart issues, so it could be that took him out because he'd been to an ER 5 days before, for that issue. But why did they suddenly decide it was a murder? So 12 years after that fact, the FBI decided it was a murder, and they then put the code out there. So they knew about the code from the start. So for me, the big mystery is, why did they suddenly decide that much later? And so there's a lot of speculation around that. If you look at the analysis sites, the general theory seems to be that maybe another one found somebody with this code, another person with this code, that the FBI have information, that they're not letting go. When you look at that second one, if you click the Vimeo one at some point, not right now, she gives you a big explanation, and interestingly enough, I will say, I don't think you said, the FBI site says that their cryptanalysts, are very, very highly trained, and they have dismissed outright that it's just gibberish from an illiterate person, firstly. Secondly, even if it's his own language that he was writing in, while that makes it really hard, if not impossible, to decipher, it still means something that is whatever, that coding is, however it's been put together. So it's kind of an interesting thing, and Jenny thinks that there's a girl that knows what this code is. And that was the general, I suppose, wasn't that the question? If he was drug running, that these were codes so that only the people that were involved in it could find it. The FBI write-up, when you look at that page of theirs, they do go on about how many times they have broken codes that have been written by drug runners and criminals in general. So it's not an unusual thing, is it, Tammy?
Right. And it helps the fact that he didn't really know how to read and write all that much when he left. His family and everyone said that, he could just scribble, but I mean, he knew how to write his name. So then you get to think, okay, well, what was going through his mind? Maybe he made up some, code because of his mind, the way his mind thinks, and just like, and scribbled little things in his way. So like he would only recognize them. But yeah, I know that girl, it was strange too. That's what, they were saying, but not that they were looking at her, but now all of a sudden she's taking an interest too and trying to crack the code and but she hasn't been able to find anything, and that's where she came in believing that someone else, coerced him into it.
Yeah, I think there's that mistake that people make. Jenny says, to make your own language is intelligent. No, the idea that illiteracy and intelligence are connected is a falsehood. For whatever reason. Look at if we look at this, if he wrote it, all of the letters are perfect, and it's that understanding that a person who can't read or write or considered illiterate doesn't mean they don't know the alphabet. It just means they can't put words together. They don't know how to structure a sentence. They don't know how to recognize groupings of words. They haven't learnt what we've all learnt, which is basically the rules of language, the written language, that is. And so there's no real indication that means that they don't know all of those letters. And the reason I say that is I think that the coding woman that you're talking about makes an assumption that he couldn't have done it because he was illiterate, whereas the FBI doesn't go there at all. They say he could easily have done it. His being illiterate isn't really a factor. Yeah? Yeah. So you've got that two schools of thought. The woman with the Vimeo, she's the amateur cryptanalyst.
I know.
It's like, we couldn't have picked more of a tongue twister.
I know, and racketeering.
She was very clear too that all you needed to do to make which I thought was great, all you needed to do to make a code was you just needed a word. You didn't even need to be able to be literate. You just needed to go get it out of a book. If you could have a set of words that you use, and then you have the alphabet lined up, and then you just put it underneath, and so on. Now you can say, well, you'd need to know how to spell for that, but not necessarily. So that was the key thing that I thought was interesting. So if you've got an illiterate person and they can work out code, all you're saying is that they don't understand the principles of written language. It doesn't mean they can't actually mimic, write, and so forth. It's an interesting area anyway. So we've had some specialist illiteracy courses in New Zealand that are free that anybody can go to in any district. And it's quite amazing how quickly adults pick up reading when they go to these programs. It's always astonishing that they pick it up so fast, which means they have got a knowledge in there. They're not learning it from scratch like babies and little wee children. And I think, I said to you, because he was so sick, I wondered if his illiteracy was the fact that from an early age he might have had a lot of time off school as well, which, would happen, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's. I think they said that he knew the alphabets, but he wasn't well at it. I mean, he just scribbled. I mean, he knew how to write his name, but he wasn't. Like you said, young age, having any kind of physical problems, being out of school so much. Yep. Plus, he bounced around. They said that a lot. Moving from place to place. So that also could puts an effect on growing up and the years and stuff.
Right. And Becca says, I'll just say read these out of the chat here. She agrees with you, Tammy. She thinks that he made it up, like he knew the words, what the words and letters meant, which is the other possibility that's out there, is that he could have created this just for himself. It was his way of putting it together. He could have dyslexia, says Becca, reverse letters to use to spell as it sounded to me when I was young, still do sometimes. The only problem we've got with that, Becca, is they have linguistic specialists that have kind of discounted that. That's one of the easy to recognize things, because I suppose, again, if you watch those videos, they talk about what they call repeated areas. So he's got groupings of letters that he uses regular, which makes all of these experts, so I'm just saying they believe this is actually code because of the way certain things are repeated and the order that they're repeated. It gives it form, if you like, and that's how they look at code when they're trying to crack it and break it, is they're looking for patterns in it. So if it was gibberish, the patterns wouldn't be evident there, you know.
Right. They said he had a lot of E's toward the end of, like, if you look, there's always like an E at the end of each, word per se,
yeah.
or sentence. There's a lot of E's, they saying.
Yeah.
That was part of his, like, program or his code.
Exactly. And everything's written in uppercase printing as well, which is usually a deliberate form as well for code, right? So you've got these
right.
groupings. If everybody looks at these pictures, these groupings were on the paper. It wasn't done by anybody else. And there were parentheses, if you see the parentheses around certain parts of it. And it just seems very, very interesting. Welcome, Ramona. It's like they stand for something individually. I don't honestly know. I've never been a code person. I've never really gone and looked at coding much. I probably should have. I'd probably love it. But I did, when Tammy pulled this one out of the hat, I did go and have a look at some of the cryptanalyst sites, and it was very interesting to see all of these amateur code breakers having a go at it, not necessarily interpreting it, but trying to decide what they thought the code might be. And there are a lot of known forms, but there are a lot of not known forms. And I do think it was interesting when they talked about the key. If you and the other person are the only ones that know the key, it can be very hard to break. But did you tell them that it was the top code? Did you tell them that, Tammy?
Yes, on the FBI site,
Yeah.
he is ranks number 3 in the most unsolved cases.
So
they're really, they're really putting it out there to find out, because they believe this is part of the answer to whether he was murdered or whatever happened to him. They believe this has something to do with that in finding, who did this to him.
Yeah, when we say he was ranked third, it wasn't his murders ranked third. It's the code. There's only 2 codes above his that out of the 10. There's 10. There's the top 10 unsolved codes, and this
right
is
that haven't been cracked yet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The top one was the Zodiac Killer. Is that right? Still the 1960s.
Right.
Was that 1960 something? And what was
I believe.
Do you remember what the next one was?
No, but a Zodiac was the first.
The top one, yeah. And this is number 3. So it's a really interesting thing, and it is possible, if it's a proper code, it's possible that somebody will crack it at some point. I did see on the FBI site, it was interesting, they were talking about a code that they'd spent some years trying to crack, and they knew who had created the code in the end, and the man was in jail. I can't remember the names now because I wasn't going to say anything about it. But I found
think it was Ramsey, something Ramsey. Who was in jail and had that code, the other code, yeah.
They had the code. But the funny thing I thought about that was he'd forgotten his own code. And so he helped them. He helped them to crack his own code, and it took a long time to do that. So it shows that it can be very difficult, which doesn't make it nonsensical or otherwise. But if you don't have the information,
because you have to take the mindset into consideration, because it's coming through that person's mind. Unless it's someone else's code being handed down and learned, You know what I mean? Other than that, if they're making this up, then you have to also go into their mental, their psyche, and what they were thinking and how they, put this together, how they, look at it, what makes sense for them.
Yeah, and yes, Jenny, these markings on these codes are his. They're not made by anybody else. So all of these around here, these look like they might be sort of thumbprinty, smudgy, so I'm assuming. And the big deal for me is actually it's very neat. You know that all of these letters are very, very neatly written. And
it's not scribbled or chicken scratched like his parents were saying.
Yeah, well, see, they mightn't be literate either when you think on it. And of course, if he is writing in code, they may not have understood that that's what it was. I did see an interesting thing where the mum was interviewed, and you were talking about the code, and it says she made this sentence which said, he ain't got no language. And I thought, well, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That could be part of the problem right there.
Yeah.
Chicken is scribbling, he's scribbling. It's like, well, maybe she couldn't read either. So, not today. Exactly. That's our joke, that not today. So you can see the one on the right. These were both found. And if you click through to the FBI website, you'll see these in full size. You can click on it and see it full screen. And these are separate. So you can see, cryptanalysts suggest too that it's easier to break a code when you have lots of instances of it, but they've only got these two. But you see the first one has the little circles around it. The other one is very clear, very detailed. You can even see that it's
very neat.
Very neat and aligned, isn't it? It's sort of like it's aligned. But the suggestion is they're both written by the same person. I saw, anyway, that they seem to think they're both written by the same person. So one could be at a table, or the other one could, and one could be while out, when you're writing on a book or whatever, while one's in a position where you can take your time and do it nice and neat. But I find it interesting with the circles too, because that could be the deliberate breakdown of a cipher, couldn't it? That could be him. If he didn't write these, that could be his interpretation. He could be separating out the parts in total.
Breaking it down, right.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. But for him to be the interpreter, now this is the bit, folks. Are you ready? For him to be the interpreter of the code, he then has to be able to read.
Yes, sir.
Because you're not just copying; you have to then be able to read.
Exactly. Yep. So, you have to know.
Yes, that's an interesting part to me. Or you have to know what it means if it's for you, But there's also a possibility, which the FBI put out there, that the code, if he was carrying, because nobody's actually got proof that he was doing drug running or anything like that, by the way. So clear. But he did.
That was only found out supposedly afterwards, like when they asked people's help, that they found out all these little other, things going on, but it was never proven.
It was never proven. But he worked for a dodgy crowd, right? What were their names? Hammer something? Hammer.
Yeah, Greg Dunix or something like that.
It's the brothers, the Hamad something. I read them somewhere. He worked for them for a bit, but then he did odd jobs for lots of people. So it's entirely possible that he could have been
because he was on disability, before when he was
exactly
for his heart and lung issues.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting case, and it leaves a lot of questions and curiosities, and none of that is easy to answer, is it? Because the inconsistencies all around this case, and it seems to me that the FBI suddenly decided this guy was murdered. That's the bit for me that out of all of it.
Yeah, no. 12 years later. Hey,
12 years later. Hey, he's now.
Murdered.
Yeah, he was murdered. They didn't go and dig up the body. There's nothing that says that they did that. Nobody called them to look at it again. They just looked at it and decided one day that he was murdered and this needed to go out there. And they put it out after trying for some time to crack the code.
You think of it, they didn't let anybody know that they had these notes.
That's right.
Not even his, family or friends or parents or anybody knew, and they heard on the TV.
And that's right too.
On the news.
Yeah. So to clarify that, the police, not the FBI, but the police.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That never told his family or anybody at the time that they found these codes on him. So of course, it's great policing, and how can it makes it all harder 12 years later, doesn't it, to find anybody that might know what it's all about.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and in particular anybody that gives the stuff. It gets a bit hard to when you've got a guy like that perhaps had a very sort of nominal group of friends. But I did find it interesting that they said he wasn't unpopular, that he was fairly well liked. And what I noticed, I'll go back to this because I don't know if it's the photo, and I looked at this a few times, and I looked at each photo. This is the only photo that I could find. I don't know if you found any other ones, Tammy, but
no, that's it.
It looked like he might have astigmatism. If you look at this eye here, astigmatism is when the eyeball is the wrong shape, and it makes it really hard to see, by the way.
Right.
And
right. I think it's round.
Yeah, well, it's odd, isn't it? It's definitely different to this one. Now, it could just be the photo, but it kept catching my eye. And if he's got astigmatism, it would mean that the vision, at least in that eye, would be really distressing. I've got a friend who had, this is horrible, so prepare yourself, but she had 2 stigmatisms, and her eyeballs were basically the size of the shape of a football, that shape of an eggy sort of shape. And because of that, she had supervision issues. And so that she could see at all enough to drive and do things, they would take a dead person's cornea and put them on her irises or over her irises, in her irises. And they would do that every 10 years. She has to have a dead person that's put in her eyes because they deteriorate, which is interesting. But I can remember one day, because we had binoculars, we shared a house, and we'd have binoculars to look out over the vista. And I pulled up these binoculars, and I just about went blind looking through them because her settings so that she could see were really bizarre. Totally bizarre. So he could have had issues like that as well, if that's what I think it might be. And we were lucky.
It's funny. Yeah, it's funny because wherever I look, this is the only picture.
Me too.
That I found.
Yeah, and I hunted because I thought, oh, surely there's another picture of him. But no, it was it. But that, I think, too, could be the fact that there was, sorry, do you want me to go back? Sorry about that. I thought it had been there for a while. It was looking. There it is. For the pictures. Yeah, no, there was no others. No matter, I hunted, and I figured that if Tammy found a different one, she'd have sent it to me. There's the FBI cryptanalysis help page. That's what it looks like. When you get in there, it gives you the breakdown on what they've done, what they've looked at, and where they ended up with it. So really kind of fascinating. And I'm back. Sorry about that, folks. Fell off. I fell off for a few minutes. We've got massive winds here again. I'm just going to go and grab Tammy. We were on the same call, and so I'm just going to add her in. Hello there. Are you back?
Hello.
We're back. We're back. Sorry.
Yay.
I fell off. Like I fell off the face of the earth. It was like a cybercrime right there. Oh dear. This is yeah, as Dorothy would say, gentleman Kiwi. This man disappeared under really weird circumstances, and being a little country, there's a lot of coverage for stuff like this, and there were a lot of ideas that came out of it, and it went on and on and on, of course, because there were some interesting things in particular at the start. The detective inspector at the beginning of all of this, Steve Rutherford, was really into it. He'd been a career officer for 36 years, and he said, I just don't believe he disappeared into a vacuum without a trace. He couldn't leave it alone. He just kept bringing it back up and bringing it back up for a very long time. It is one of the biggest mysteries, he says, that he has been involved with in his career. For New Zealand, when we look at murder and mayhem, we have a 99% success rate at closing cases. Just so you understand, when something goes unsolved, we just can't let it go. Can't let it go. It's got to be there. Now, that doesn't mean we've never had unsolved cases, but they're few and far between. Usually a perpetrator, a person who's committed an offence, somebody goes missing, is found at some point within a few months at least, you know. So on the weekend prior to his disappearance, Jim cancelled an outing with wife Tracy to go to an unplanned meeting. He wouldn't discuss the meeting in any way with her, and he wouldn't say where he was going, who he was seeing, but did say he needed to hire a suit for the meeting. And on his return, he seemed to be in good spirits. Well, this is the reporting of the case now, but I've got a but. I was there, and at the time we are talking, he hired or bought a what do you call it, a man's dress suit, tuxedo. He bought a full-on dress suit. We're not talking about just a nice suit to go out in, which was incredibly unusual, right, for anybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then, of course, he's not telling his wife what the meeting is, where he's going, or anything else. Also at the time, they said he returned at like 3 in the morning, and while he seemed happy, she was in bed when he returned. The next day, his behaviour was also out of character, and he went out in the afternoon to search for his friend, Stephen Taylor. Now, again, at the time, I tried to hunt this down, but it's quite a long time ago now, and I couldn't find it. But they had video footage of him inside a car park for a block of flats, apartments in the city, and, of course, you had to be a member or you needed to live there or have a pass to be in that space. But he was agitated. You could see he was agitated in this video. There was no sound, and a man basically came out and said, bugger off, you know, you're not allowed to be here if you don't live here or if you're not with somebody who lives here. So he was preoccupied. He was told he was trespassing, and even then in the video he sort of stayed for a little while, and you could see he was being pushed to leave. Then when he got home that day, he told his wife there was something he couldn't tell her. Okay? And these were like, you've got to ask about her relating of that conversation. You know, nobody just walks up to somebody and goes, there's something I've got to tell you, but I can't tell you. Unless she was asking questions. Well, you know, so she had to be asking him questions about what was going on for it to get to that point. Now, the following day, this is the 21st of June, 2004, at the age of 43, he went to work as usual. Now, he worked at the Glenbrook Steel Mill. Now, that's the biggest steel mill in our country, by the way. And because it's a steel mill and because we're a bunch of complainers when it comes to industry, don't mess up my backyard. They have 900 hectares surrounding property, okay, so that they're not really actually near anybody. And it's an interesting thing to note because that's 900 hectares. There's 4 acres in a hectare. So we're talking can you do the math? 400
Wow,
acres,
that's massive.
4 acres in a hectare. Yeah, it's a big area, and there's native bush, there's farming land, and it's a combo of things. There's highways running around it as well. Anyway, he heads off to work as usual. His car is seen arriving at the car park around 6 a.m. And he didn't turn up for his first meeting at 9 a.m. That's when things went bust. So he's at work at 6, and then he doesn't show up for a meeting at 9. Now, being a big company like this, they have very strict controls. You can see that actually this is fencing around, very high fencing around the steel mill there. They have a huge employment rate. There's 1,200 people work in there, so it's its own mini little town.
I'm sure being that you have to have ID and whatever to get in and out of the facility itself. Yep,
they have guard on the gate 24/7. They've got a drop bar, which trucks come and go, blah, blah, blah. And, of course, the fence itself is something like 12 feet high, 14 feet high. It's not an easy place to get into without meaning to be. Now, he was last actually physically seen at 6:30 a.m. in a huge industrial building to the south of the mill. Now, at the time, again, everybody said it was odd to see him there. Now, he'd worked here for a very long time, so we can discount any kind of confusion about where he is. It's not like he was new and was hunting down something. There were areas that you would work in. I'm sure there are areas in the place that you would never go, because you wouldn't need to, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Later, work shut down at the steel mill because they couldn't find him. This is how fast they worked at it. Within a couple of hours, they shut down the whole mill and started a search, finding no trace of him at all. His car was still in the car park. His lunch was on his desk and his belongings in his locker. But Jim was nowhere to be found, and the police were alerted at that point, and they searched for miles around the mill site to no avail. Now, then things start to get a little weird. The sighting later that day of a man running away from the searchers brought hope that he was at least alive. A digger operator spotted a man he said was running for his life. That was quoted by Dorothy, who was the search coordinator, and he was all over the news, and he was convinced, the digger operator was convinced that it was Donnelly. Another sighting, this time, of a man wearing mill clothing at the same time, or approximately same time, was also believed to be of Jim, and he was seen running through the fields as well by a property neighbor, somebody in a neighboring field or whatever. No mill workers were supposed to be in that area at all. So we've got a sighting of either two men or two sightings of the same men. Nobody's really sure. Then on the Saturday following, Dorothy found tracks on the shoreline. So this mill is about 2 k's from maybe 2.5 to 3 kilometres from the beach. It's not really a beach. Malacco Harbour is a very big harbour. The airport's on the opposite side. It's a treacherous harbour. There's a lot of sandbanks that people can wander out on to get scallops, and they get caught. Lots of interesting stuff goes on there. And then Glenbrook Beach is it's not, we call it a beach, but it's not really. It's just mud. There are carvings down there. There's a couple of caves, not deep enough to go into or hide in. They're very shallow, with a lot of like these mammoth paintings on the walls of these sort of very soft stone cliff faces. They're not, when I say cliffs, they'd be about 20 feet high. Nothing really dramatic. They found these tracks, some washed over by the tide, which meant too that the tide had come in and gone to a certain extent. And this is him, he thought. This is Dorothy. He followed the track south to the southern boundary, where they climbed a bank and disappeared into grass surrounding the oxidation pond. So we're still the boundary of the steel mill. And finally, they went off the mill property. Back at New Zealand Steel, he checked the records of work boots worn by the staff and the boots most recently issued to Jim. He discovered they had the same tread pattern, which matched the tracks that he had followed. The same friend he had been looking for, which needs to be said too. I found this man to be very unforthcoming. The couple of interviews that he had, you sort of thought, oh, and the way, when you just hear something and you think, no, he wasn't ill. According to all accounts, he was fit and healthy. He's actually a metallurgist. We got more words today than you've had, Hot.
I know.
Metallurgist. I'm not sure how you'd say that. He was a scientist of metal.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, that one. He was a scientist of metal. He was well known to be an inventor, and this led to a whole pile of stories, of theories anyway, of people coming out and saying that he had developed.
Yeah, he needs something and somebody wanted it. Oh, boy.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly right. The stories for ages. After about a couple of months when it was clear he wasn't going to show up dead or turn up by himself, stories started to come out. And then we have a program called Sensing Murder, which is a psychic show, which honestly is a bit embarrassing. And they were saying that with his invention, they just clamped onto that as well, which made it worse. But it was all through the papers as a theory that he'd created this invention and he was selling it to the Russians. Or we don't have a problem with Russians, so you wouldn't need to do that in secret here. It's quite a crack up. They're saying that he'd invented this new something and, of course, was selling it surreptitiously to some other country, and he'd gone underground, or that he was a spy.
They ran him up, that one.
It's like little old New Zealand. We're in the thick of it. There was a whole lot of stuff, but he was a bit of an inventor, but that was part of his job. So I suppose you're talking that word engineering, aren't you, that you've got people that have to develop specific. But the story does get weirder. It isn't finished yet. The same friend he'd been looking for actually made this comment on the news, and I always found this to be really odd, which is why I mentioned it. He says, Stephen Taylor says, this is the one he was looking for in the car park, that there was video footage of us. I don't like our chances of finding him when he is playing the hunted. He is a chess player. What an odd thing for he'd been friends with this man since school. And
that sounds cryptic to me right there.
Right, yeah, isn't that a bizarre thing for him to say? And that statement alone started people thinking maybe his friend knows that he's not gone, or knows where he is, or knows there was just an oddity to that comment. He goes on to say he will be thinking 2, 3, or 4 steps ahead. Well, playing chess, you might be like that, but it's not the same in real life, is it? If you're running around. Now, it's to be noted that his bank accounts were never touched. His cards were never touched. And as I said, his car. We're talking a fairly, not remote wouldn't be the right word, but he would have to get out onto the highway. He lived in a place called Dannemora, Howick, so you're talking he lived about 30 k's, maybe more, away from the mill. We are also saying that to get anywhere, he couldn't go right, and I'll put it this way, because you're going to go to what they call South Head, North Head, which is the Monaco Harbour. That's it. There's nowhere else to go. It's peninsula. You end up looking out to sea, but you can't go anywhere. It's not a major boat harbour because of the sand banks and all the rest. It's got a main trip into Onehunga, which means he'd have to at least get to Onehunga if he was going to get on a boat, or he'd have to have pre-set up something with somebody who was prepared to go over what is one of the most dangerous bars in the country. So we're not talking a casual jump into a boat with a mate and run off kind of a thing, right? And even then you would have to pick your day so carefully, because even ships use pilots to get in here. Boats that do it all the time have to have call up and a little bit of a consult. So we aren't, your question becomes, well, nobody saw him walking down the highway. You know what I mean? Major highway, it's used all the time. Nobody saw him, any strange men wandering up and down that highway. It would take probably 3 hours to walk from Glenbrook to get back to the main motorway, and nobody saw anybody. So we've got this big, huge thing happening on the day of his disappearance. By the evening news from 6 o'clock in the morning, it's all over the country.
Right, that was lickety-split. It wasn't that he was just gone for days or months. And, this all happened back-to-back immediately. So there's got to be a real small window. Things had to have been, happen lightning fast,
Exactly. We're pretty good at spotting stuff as well. We caught the French blow up the Rainbow Warrior types because we're just nosy. So they couldn't go anywhere without being seen. Like within a day of Rainbow Warrior being blown up. And this is just a little country, people look out of place and other people notice that. If somebody isn't where they should be, if you're driving along a main highway, you notice if somebody's walking down the road. So if you're one of the farmers, all of the properties around a farms, if you're a farmer, you notice if somebody's walking over your property.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Strangers are wandering around.
Yeah, especially since that, like you're saying, is kind of like a designated area. That's the mill is there, farm areas around. It's it's a pretty big area. And they also being the female, they're environmentally conscious. So it's a specific area. So it's not just everybody zips in and out.
Right. Jenny's just asked, did the company take care of his wife? They didn't have to because he disappeared. He didn't get damaged or
injured or anything on the job.
On the job,
as part of his job.
Exactly. If he was at the mill anywhere, he would have been found. By the way, there was only one area that he could possibly be. But the story gets funkier. By the way, I haven't finished yet. 5 days.
Oh wow.
Yeah. But wait, there's more. 5 days later, mill workers found his hard hat near a vat of acid together with his destroyed belongings. It wasn't actually found near, by the way. It was found in. So they were actually thrown in. With his destroyed belongings. The only clues left behind were the contents of Donnelly's wallet and the work keys found I got that wrong. So they found his hard hat and a few of his belongings by the vat, and because of that, they emptied the vat. And when they emptied the vat, they found his wallet and work keys in the vat of acid. Now, it was hydrochloric acid, which is used to clean steel, get rid of impurities, to make it nice and polished looking.
Right.
And it's not strong enough. So just as we're clear, it's not strong enough an acid to dissolve a body. It was.
Oh yeah. Okay.
That was the big question on the day.
Yeah. Does it break bodies down?
Does it break bodies down? And the answer is absolutely not. Okay. That's first. Secondly, it didn't even break his wallet down, and his credit cards were still in.
True. Yeah. If you can't break that down,
break that down. But that's 5 days later that was found. So the question became, with all the searching that went on, this is an area he would not have been in. Again, at the time, they'd said he would never go into this area. He would have no need to go into this area. It didn't make sense that his stuff was there. And how come it was placed by this vat, which just happened to have his wallet and his keys inside, right? Now, at the time, a lot of conjecture was that he would have thrown the stuff in there. But then they said, this isn't a stupid man. So if he wanted to throw it in there so nobody would find it, why would he leave his items outside of it? Where it would direct attention to it. Do you follow? And then they also added he would know that the acid, because of course then the question...
Of course.
Yeah. Did somebody want to destroy exactly? Did somebody want to destroy the plastic, destroy the wallet so nobody would find it? And they said he knew and would know that the acid would not destroy those products. So you've got something that looks like a deliberate clue, a deliberate misdirection maybe. That was always put out there, Jenny, that maybe he wanted to start a new life. But again, that was so he has two children that, by all reports, he loved dearly. But just assuming, because I've got to say, right back in the day, when the news items were on, my first thought was that he was gay, and that was what he couldn't tell his wife. But I saw her in an interview, and I knew she was lying in this interview, and so I think that maybe they had an agreement and she knew he was gay, okay?
Could be that, and even though, like you said, New Zealand is pretty small, so for him to be starting a new life, I would think that he would leave,
exactly.
Yeah, and because he would be found one way or another.
Yeah, and we don't have a situation, like child support, all of that's government regulated here, and, it's not going to ruin his life to have to pay child support. He, by the way, would have been on top wages. That man would have been earning very, very good money.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just so as we're clear. So he's lost his job by doing this. He's dumped a car. He's dumped a family if he's wanting to start a new life. Everything he could have. The house, He built the home in Dannemora was a fairly new home. It was beautiful. So he's lost that as well. So he's gained absolutely nothing. So there's a lot of questions around that. But the big deal was that these theories that came around, I really felt that he was gay, but at the same time, I didn't think that it would make him run off. So I wondered if there was perhaps a little, there was a murder going on here, that I think maybe he was in high spirits and got the meeting and all of that was about meeting somebody else, meeting a man, suddenly falling in love, having a new lease on life. Now, that could be harder, couldn't it, to tell everybody, to front up to everybody and say, hey, I'm gay.
Especially back when, in that era, it wasn't really people. Nowadays they come out, it's not a problem. But back, remember when I was young, all of that was in the closet. Nobody came forward.
We are talking 2004, though.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well,
and New Zealand's
I think it was kind of borderline at that point.
Well, we're not here. So we've had legal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we've had legal gay marriage for over 20 years. We're not.
Oh, all right.
We're not worried about it. But
throw the towel.
Personally, though, like a person inside themselves may have concerns.
True. Mm-hmm.
It's a possibility.
Especially who he was. He's a big gun there, so. That would maybe tarnish his reputation and whatever. So maybe he was thinking in that, way.
It's a man's industry as well. It's a very much a man's industry. So there are a lot of questions. For me, even if he did decide to start a new life, I honestly think he probably would have just left his wife and disappeared into obscurity without any of the mystery. He wouldn't have had to have had it. It's all very strange. The fact that
he has too much to lose otherwise. Everything else could have been on board. Yeah,
he could even have left that job and got another job. It wouldn't have been the end of the world. But the interesting part is the digger seeing the man running across the field, and that becomes a question. And then we've got the footprints and the down by the beach. I've got the question I'm asking there is. If you, even though you don't know the lay of the land, that's not going towards the road. If he's gone down to the beach, so I can only imagine that he's done that because he can't get around the fencing any other way.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So those fences are pretty high. So it may be that he's slipped out somehow through the main gate, which is possible, change of shift. If he was disguised or if he was wearing the mill uniform, he could just walk out with other people. But again, his hat was found. We've got these things, these oddities, and that's why I find it a bit bizarre. Doesn't matter which scenario you look at, the inconsistencies are there. Whether he's run off to live a new life, then why put the wallet and the card and the acid? It doesn't make sense. He could have just dumped them in the rubbish. And then why put a pile of clothes like his work hat? Those are safety hats that men wear on construction, or people wear on construction sites. Why put that and a few other belongings beside the vat that you've dumped? This is like a weird thing to me. That's just weird, because if you're trying to make things disappear, it's the opposite of doing that. To put something in the vat and then something beside the vat that you put the stuff in, it just, there's something very odd about that. Completely odd about that.
Another duck goose thing. Well, here's my stuff here. Here's my car here. But you're like, here's a guy going off into the sunset over there.
Yeah.
Just too many other, like you say, odd things. Like it doesn't go together.
The general idea seemed to be at the time, and I do sort of agree with it, but it's folly, is that whole putting the clothes there and throwing the stuff into the vat was to give the impression he'd jumped in. But what we know is he wouldn't have done that. Let's put it that way. He would have known that acid would not have taken out his body or his wallet or his keys. So that's it right there. So did somebody else do that?
I feel like someone else placed his stuff there in order to divert whatever else was going on, and throw people off the track.
Yeah. It's a really interesting question, because then you've got to go, why?
Right, especially since he wasn't known to be in that area. Like he usually didn't go there. So that brings the thing is okay, someone else brought his stuff there and played since, let's, get them off the track this way.
Yeah.
You know, maybe like you say, if there was someone in there that he was having a relationship with, they could have easily, they could have done something to either help him, sort of throw off the track in the mystery, or, to divert people from that other person himself.
Well, the thing is, they would have had to have had his, because this is 5 days later, so they would have had to have had his keys, his wallet, his hard hat, and they said belongings, and I'm not really sure what that meant, but since he clearly had his boots on him, maybe a day glow, they have to wear all of that safety gear, so it might have been just his safety gear, which indicates too that he would have been wandering around without it, which would have stuck out like a sore thumb. When in an industry where everybody's got their safety gear on, and New Zealand's health and safety, pride jingos, they'll all be wearing it all right, then a person without the safety gear would stick out like a sore thumb, which means the person who put them there likely was wearing safety. It's all a really strange few things. So when you look at that few days, only a few days to that week afterwards, that whole period is where he's gone looking for his friend. His friend makes that statement. Now, I've got a picture here of Tracy, and that's the woman. I'd swear she lied, Now, the thing here is I couldn't tell you why, but when you saw her interviewed for the news, it was only very short, but you just felt like she knew something or she was lying about something, not necessarily where he's gone or what he's doing, but yeah, it's a very, very, there were a couple of suspicious people. His friend and her were suspicious people. And so at the end of all of that, if you've got any ideas or you want to pop it out there, I like that Tom put it, maybe he went to Newfoundland. I don't think we even heard of Newfoundland till I saw something called, it was some kind of PI show. Can't remember what it is now. But that's when I first heard about it. She does look suspicious. Hey, Ramona. No, they've never declared him dead, actually. We don't quite do that because she can just annul her marriage at some point through it's not hard to get single if you're living here. So at some point, if she wanted to marry again, she could just be single. In 2010, there was a follow-up story done with her family, and that's the 2 kids are growing up now. The girl and he had a son and a daughter, and they're all, how they do with these photos. It's kind of sickening, really. They make everybody, look sad for the cameras. It's like, come on, these kids won't be feeling that all day, every day at this stage of their lives. It's happened quite some time ago, 2004. They were just young children. But every time I look at her, honestly, I sit there. It sounds terrible, but I just think, you're hiding something. Now, I don't think that she knows what happened to him, so we'll be clear about that. I just think that she knows that he wasn't going to stay with her or something was changing in their relationship.
Oh, yeah. When they had that conversation, he fessed up, and she knew what was going on in the background, and she's just not letting on to that. She's playing deaf, dumb, blind, and stupid.
Exactly, because with how it goes, so she, no matter which way it goes, she gets the house, she gets all the stuff. There's not going to ever be a question about that. But, if he stayed alive, he'd have got more. We've got a 50-50 rule. You walk away with 50%. So again, there's more value in us not trying to pretend we're dead.
Sure, yeah.
It's not the same as in the States at all by any stretch of the imagination. Jenny says, I keep thinking some kind of deception from him, and that's all I got, like he is not dead. So that's an interesting thing too. I'm certain he had something going on outside of his marriage at the time and probably just before this all happened. And I must admit, a lot of people thought that he'd run off to have this new life with somebody. It become a prevalent feeling, and newspapers.
Well, there's a lot of things, especially because who he was, maybe he invented something. Then you have the theory that he went to go off and live a new life, so there's conflicting. There's a lot of different, angles that you can look at this.
Yeah. But there's that whole idea, for example, the witness saw him running at full speed, running very fast away from the mill. I've got a question about that. He would have been less noticeable if he walked.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Much
So
less
then who
notice.
was it that was running? Was it the other person that they were saying there's a possibility
Exactly.
of a secondary person that was running?
Yeah. So that's when it was decided that he was dead. Now, there's big oxidation ponds there, and the need to understand about that was the one area that the detective said, quote unquote, in 2010, Dave Glossop said, "We've never been able to diagnose that there was some odd behaviour, but that's subjective," which is true. It's subjective because we don't know the surround. That's what I mean. The stories being related by the wife and his mate are unusual. They're a little bit odd. That makes them sound odd. You know what I mean? So you've only got their words, in other words, to take for that. You don't know that he was behaving oddly, and you're not hearing the surrounding circumstance.
Right, that's according to them and their perception.
Exactly. And Glossop goes on to say, it would be different if we knew all the facts. He didn't display overtly strange behaviour, but there were some actions which could relate to his disappearance. So I would like to know why. And he goes on to say that there was only one stone unturned, he put it, and that was that the oxidation ponds weren't emptied out, which in 2011 his wife called for, but she didn't call for it till then. And there's a question about that.
Mm-hmm.
But the oxidation...
That would be full, it would be full gone by then. There would be nothing.
Well, no, he would probably still have bones there.
Okay.
She might not know that, though. But the thing is, bones do take a very long time to break down, actually. So the oxidation ponds, though, the reason that they didn't clear them is actually they cover over 5 acres. It's one pond that big.
Yeah. Massive.
So, it's massive. It's not like a little something that you just go, yeah, sure, we'll drain that. Because where do you drain it to? You're not allowed to put that in the harbour. So what are you going to do? And you can't put it all in the soil. It's like a big problem. And the detectives did say that would have been the one thing. But part of the reason that they didn't really push for that was he was seen heading away from that area. Although he was seen near it, he was also seen heading away from it. So what would induce him to come back and jump in or,
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a big deal. I gather there were no cameras in the mill. There are cameras in the mill, but not in the mill itself. Now, I know that the police, we saw the cameras from the car park, and I don't doubt that everybody poured over those to see at the shift change whether he came or whether he went. They poured through cars because there were theories that another car came in and he hopped into it and left with them. But, of course, that was put down by the fact that they had to stop at the gate and show IDs. And they said, well, not if they're coming out. And they said, well, no, not if you're coming out, but that man's looking straight into your car. And so he'll see a guy that he's seen coming in for the last 20 years,
Mm-hmm. That and the fact that to get in, you have to show ID. So coming out is not a bad, thing.
Exactly. And then the other guy they have to both have ID either way.
Right.
So it starts to get a bit theatrical after a bit, but it is a genuine mystery because he's never been found, and because there's these oddities that there definitely was a man seen that day running away from the mill in the afternoon, which means he was hanging around there, from the time he wasn't seen at 6:30 onwards, he hadn't been seen. So in some capacity, space or place, he wasn't left or hadn't left. He wasn't seen in the morning at 7 or 10. He was seen in the afternoon. So that's hours, hours.
Right, and it makes you kind of wonder, okay, did everybody clock out, when their shift was over and stuff like that? So where did this guy just run off to? Did he clock out at some point, in the afternoon and then run off through the facility to leave?
Well, he definitely did that. Yeah, that was the thing. They shut if we go back to the initial story, they shut the mine down by 9 o'clock. At 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, they shut the whole mine down, the whole mill down. Now, at that point, you've got the guy on the gates on high alert anyway, right?
Mm-hmm. That's true. Mm-hmm.
So, and then we've got these 12-foot fences all around the mill itself, and then we've got further fencing further out, which is regular sort of fencing. So there's a question around that because they move so quickly, then you've got a whole mill now pretty much aware that there's something going on, and they're going to be on a high alert. As soon as you get these alarms going, as soon as you've got stuff going on, people notice things that are out of place, don't they?
Oh, yes.
You know,
the little aware antennas pop up.
Yeah. Ramona thinks he had a dead marriage. I just think he's dead. I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh after saying something like that. It's like, that's poor taste.
Dead marriage.
Dead marriage. He's dead. It's quite an interesting thing. When he did go, so right at the very beginning there, probably by the following day, I could smell earth in my nose whenever I saw the story, so I thought he was dead, actually. So there we go. But that's our show for today, Tammy. Well done. We'll have to do this again. Actually, I think we've got a place on IntuiTalks for an Unsolved Mysteries show. What do you think, everybody?
Oh, yes. I feel it in the making,
It's in the making. There's. Did he say here's a video about it? Oh, Tom's found a video about it. There you go. You can pop that out there and have a look at that. Now, next week on The Breakfast Show, I've got Kelly Jo. She's going to do one-question readings for the show, and we'll look forward to Tammy and getting into some unsolved mysteries because I really enjoyed that. I thought that was a buzz. Tammy loves doing her research.
Oh, I love them. I love them. I get cranking and I find the weirdest ones, so I really get into it.
Oh, that's excellent, though. And I think that's the thing. There are so many. It's not just about finding a dead person, is it? It's also about the fact that so many things around that can be really unusual or really odd. And it is kind of nice to stretch one's or flex one's intuitive muscle in an area that may end up I don't think we ever, to be honest, really help the police in these things, but it's a nice way to stretch muscles. Years ago, we had a girl that went missing, Tracy Ann Patience, and I think that would be good for my next show is talking about Miss Tracy. That was like a big deal. That was a really long time ago. And so anybody else that wants to call in or wants to join into these shows, keep your eye out for it. It'll be an Unsolved Mysteries or something along those lines on IntuiTalks.com. For all of those, we know this is going out to Google Play. We know it's going out to iTunes. We know it's going out to Kiwi 6. We know it's going out to Spreaker and Stitcher. So anybody listening to the archives, www.intuitalks.com to check out the shows. Also pop along and have a look at The Breakfast Show. Ring into shows, be a part of the shows. We've got photos, not just sound bites, but we've had a great time. Thank you so much, Tammy. I've really enjoyed today.
Oh, thank you. I love it. Thank you for having me.
It was a pleasure. Bye-bye, everybody. Say goodbye.
Bye.